All right, let's dive right into this explainer and crack open a seriously fascinating historical mystery about secret identities, loyalty, and early statecraft. We're looking at a deeply intriguing question from the early days of Islamic civilization, one that actually has some pretty profound implications for how we understand things today. We are talking about the strict rules of engagement during a time of incredible high-stakes tension.
So, here is the big question. Some historians often make the accusation that Al-Abbās, who is the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, acted as a spy for the Islamic State while he was living in Mecca. But what does the evidence actually reveal when we dig into it? You see, some modern commentators have taken this historical theory and used it to suggest that Muslims living in non-Muslim lands can act as subversive agents. We're going to strictly examine the historical sources today to see if that narrative actually holds up to scrutiny.
Now, to really wrap our heads around this, it is absolutely crucial to understand a concept called aman. In Islamic jurisprudence, an aman is a strict security covenant. It's what defines a person's citizenship and residency status, and it completely, unequivocally prohibits any breach of trust or treachery. This legal concept is literally the anchor for our entire investigation. Think about it. If Al-ʿAbbās was formerly a Muslim living under an aman in Makkah, acting as a spy would be a massive, serious violation of that covenant.
Before we get into the battles and the intrigue, we have to put ourselves in the mindset of pre-Islamic Mecca. Modern concepts like citizenship or passports, they didn't exist. Tribal protection and kinship were everything. Al-Abbās was this highly intelligent, respected leader of the Banu Hashim tribe. The ruling Quraysh tolerated him because they knew he loved his nephew, but they operated under the assumption that he wasn't a Muslim, or at the very least, he certainly didn't declare it openly.
Okay, let's lay this out on a timeline and see how the story builds. We are going to track Al-Abbás's actions across three pivotal early historical events: the Second Pledge of Al-Aqaba in 622, the Battle of Badr in 624, and the Battle of Uhud in 625. By looking at these specific moments, we can really start to piece together what his true status and motivations were during these incredibly volatile years.
Let's start with 622 CE, the Second Pledge of Al-Aqaba. Picture this, it's the dead of night and 75 individuals quietly slip away to meet the Prophet. It is a strictly top-secret meeting. And guess who was right there in the middle of it? Al-ʿAbbās. He kept this massive secret and actively assisted with the proceedings. This proves a vital point. He was entirely capable of deeply assisting the Muslim cause while still being historically documented as a non-Muslim at that time. Fast forward a couple of years to 624 CE, at the Battle of Badr. Al-Abbās is actually captured by the Muslims. Now, facing a very heavy ransom, he suddenly claims to be a Muslim. But the Prophet's response to this is fascinatingly cautious. He didn't just immediately take his uncle's word for it. He essentially told him, Allah knows if your Islam is true, but we have to judge by what is apparent. It's a striking moment because it shows that even his own nephew wasn't entirely certain of his formal conversion right then and there.
And this brings us to the event that really sits at the heart of the historians' debate. Just before the Battle of Uhud, Al-Abbās sends a trusted servant on horseback to warn the Muslims about the approaching Quraysh army. He completely did this of his own volition. Now, when the Prophet received this warning letter, he didn't just blindly act on it. He actually took the time to cautiously verify the information with other spies. Make no mistake, if Al-Abbās had been an official, sworn Muslim spy working for the state, that secondary layer of cautious verification probably wouldn't have been necessary.
Section 1. The Secret of Khaybar, a test of loyalty and permitted deception. Okay, this next part is a really wild story. So a man named Al-Hajjaj had just embraced Islam at the Battle of Khaybar, but he had a ton of his own wealth tied up back in Makkah. He was granted a very rare dispensation by the Prophet to actually lie about the battle's outcome so he could safely enter Makkah and retrieve his money. He went to Al-Abbās and basically begged him to hide the truth for 3 agonizing days so he could get his wealth and escape.
And Al-Abbās? He agreed. He played along entirely with the lie that the Muslims had been defeated. But the moment those 3 days passed and Al-Hajjaj was safely away, Al-Abbās put on his best clothes, walked right up to the Kaaba, and triumphantly revealed the true Muslim victory to the completely stunned Quraysh. He kept the secret perfectly. But we have to ask, does keeping a secret make him a Muslim spy? Well, as the sources point out, he had already kept the massive secret of Al-Aqaba years prior as a non-Muslim, so secrecy alone doesn't prove espionage.
Now, you might actually be wondering about the legality of Al-Hajjaj's lie in the first place. Under Islamic law, deception is incredibly restricted.
It's strictly limited to 3 highly specific circumstances: during an active state of war, when reconciling between feuding people, and during specific private conversations to maintain peace between spouses. That's it.
So how did Al-Hajjaj get away with it? One scholar, Taqiyuddin al-Nabhani, argued that Mecca was in a state of active war. But if we look closely at the historical texts, it was actually during a period of treaty. Therefore, the source material clarifies this was a specific legal dispensation, known as a rukhsah, granted simply so a man could safely retrieve his rightful, hard-earned wealth. It was a targeted exception for justice. It was absolutely not a blanket green light for treachery, cheating, or breaching a security covenant.
Section 2. The final emigrant, pinpointing the exact timeline of his conversion.
So eventually, Al-ʿAbbās finally leaves Mecca to formally emigrate, and on his way, he unexpectedly bumps into this massive Muslim army at a place called Juffa. And here is the glaring, undeniable fact. He was completely unaware of their expedition to conquer Mecca. Just think about that for a second. If he was an official embedded spy for the Islamic State, he absolutely 100% would have known about the impending massive military conquest of his own city.
When they met, the prophet rejoiced at his uncle's arrival. By making the journey to emigrate just moments before Makkah finally fell, Al-ʿAbbās cemented a pretty incredible legacy. He became the very last human being to be formally counted amongst the emigrants. In fact, the prophet famously told him right then, there is no emigration after the conquest.
So what does all this add up to? Ultimately, classical scholars like Ibn Hajar appear to have hit the nail on the head. Al-ʿAbbās converted right before the conquest. This means that any of his prior intelligence gathering, or those warnings sent to Medina, were done out of deep tribal loyalty and family love as a non-Muslim. He was not operating as a subversive Muslim spy breaking a security covenant. The strict rules of Sharia regarding espionage just didn't apply to him during those earlier events because of his status.
Section 3. The fifth column myth. The modern implications of a historical misunderstanding.
So, how does misreading this story about Al-ʿAbbās actually impact today's world? Well, we can look at other historical figures to see how actual Muslims behaved while living in Makkah. Take Nu'aym ibn Abdullah, for example. He remained openly Muslim in Makkah for 6 years after the initial migration. He was protected by his tribe, he generously provided for the poor, and most importantly, he never acted as a spy, not once. He just lived his life, faithfully observing his social agreements.
This brilliantly highlights the stark night-and-day contrast between myth and reality. The false fifth column myth suggests that Muslims living under non-Muslim rule are secretly plotting subversion or treachery, but the actual historical reality, which is heavily based on respecting the Aman, reveals a focus on open dialogue, utilizing legal advocacy, and strictly adhering to covenants of security. And we don't even have to look back 1,000 years to see this in practice. Early 20th century British converts like Abdullah Quilliam and Marmaduke Pickthall perfectly demonstrate this. When they wanted to support their beliefs and defend the Ottoman Caliphate, they didn't resort to sneaky subversion. They used purely legal, transparent advocacy. They were writing magazines, lobbying parliament, forming associations. The whole shebang was entirely out in the open.
This transparent approach isn't just some historical accident. It is the fundamental methodology for engagement. It has always been open, intellectual, and transparent because that is what's outlined directly in the Quran itself. It literally commands believers to invite to the way of the Lord with wisdom, kind advice, and to debate in the best manner. Treachery and subversive spying, they simply have no place in this framework.
I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. We've seen the evidence today. We've seen that the earliest Muslims and figures like Al-ʿAbbās strictly respected their social and security agreements. So, if the historical reality is so abundantly clear, why is the myth of the subversive fifth column still so widely peddled today? It's a real question of media, perception, and sometimes a deliberate misreading of history. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the narratives.